I'm back. I might have to cut this short again, but I'm back for now. And we were talking about the element of fire and how all the elements in Chinese medicine, the five elements, every organ, endocrine, and body part is related to one of those five elements. And when we have too much fire in our bodies, what happens? We burn out. The adrenal fatigue, the chronic fibromyalgia, the inflammation in the body. And nature really is always showing us how to be present with our body of work and our body so that we can get back into harmony of the elements. So, fire, wood feeds fire. Every element feeds itself, and if you're in a state of not tending your garden, if things have got overgrown, if you're trying to be in constant preparation for things that you have no control over, you're going to burn out. And that's the wildfire that nature at the moment in the garden route is really expressing that there needed to be some cutback. And this is in the moment a terrible crisis for the people that live there, for the animals, for everything else. Hi Kelly, I'm back. Nice that you came back. And it's exhausting, right? Because we're living from a place of trauma, drama, and emergency where we get addicted to this apathy of, well, what can I do to change it? And my invitation to you today is to really look at how can you get more in alignment? How can you get more in harmony with your own internal natural elements of stoking your fire? If you don't have enough heat, you get damp. Things start to stagnate. Your lymph flow slows down. If you have too much fire in the body, what happens? Well, you internally combust. Things have to burn up, and we are in this time right now, this big moon that's really inviting us to come back to our hearts. And as I was saying earlier, it's really one of those things where it feels a little messy and a little clumsy whenever I start these online conversations or not, whatever I'm doing in life, is that we've been programmed to have to prepare to the point of exhaustion and wanting to get everything right and pushing when we need to actually rest, or taking a pause when things start to get a little bit too much wind in them. It stokes the fire and things burn out of control. So we can only acknowledge that we have the present moment. We only have this moment. And when you take the identification, when you take the I out of the, well, I can't do anything because I'm far away, or I can't do this because I don't have the money, or I can't do this because whatever your I can't is, you're in that game of limitation where you actually take yourself out of the game before you even got a foot into it. And then it becomes this life death situation on your nervous system that just either shuts you down or puts you into such hyper arousal that you just literally feel like you're running for your life all the time. So, and I've got WhatsApp messages coming in here where it's very responsive, right? We're either aligning and agreeing, or we're resisting or reacting to what's going on around us. That is how the world functions, not the natural order of things, but that's really how the human side of the dynamics of how things work in the world is. That the news, the hype in the media around natural disasters, around political matters, what the hung parliament in the UK right now, you can't do anything about that. All you can do is tend to your own garden, look at where you're out of balance, and go back into that. Because when we're so obsessed with who we think we are that we have to defend our limitations rather than keep expanding into a greater possibility to really access all of you, when your ego is saying, oh no, I need to be important and I need to get this right and I want things to stay the same, you have to look at what's in your control to change. And the only thing is that you have the power to choose how you stand in all this chaos that's going on around you, and look at what contribution that you can be. Hi Christina. So it really is about unhooking from the matrix. It's being your own Neo and looking at who are the other Neos in your life that you can, really become the Robin Hood and his merry men that's going to create and contribute to something that's greater than just feeding the fire, feeding the addiction to the drama, feeding the addiction to the crisis. Because we see this over and over again, and I really want to wake up in a world where we're changing things in a bigger way that is much more conscious and much more aware of a sustainable future, not just reacting in the moment. I think crisis is like the one that's going on now. To see all the people that are organizing food drops and are flying clothing and are opening up their homes to people in need and taking in animals. I think it's commendable, it's wonderful, and it's what's needed now. But how many times have you seen this play out over and over again? Fukushima, all the big natural disasters, shootings, we're not even talking about natural, we're talking about man-made disasters where people are all up in arms, the problem reaction solution scenario, where a problem gets created, whether that is orchestrated or natural, and then we wait for the reaction, and then you step in with the problem. David Icke, one of the biggest conspiracy theorists in the world, talks about this a lot, that a lot of it is engineered. And it doesn't matter about who done it. The fact of the matter is that how do we sustain the longevity of goodwill and staying in our hearts, not just in times of crisis? That's what I'm really interested in. Hi, Robin. And I'd love to know your thoughts on that. So, sort of type in the comments and let's get some dialogue going. Because I know that when I kind of take myself out of the game, this game of crisis and craziness, and I come back to my heart and I just show up, it's not about me. It's about the greater sustainability of us as a species. I'm freezing up. Okay. Like this? I don't know. All right. So what if we can get out of the limitation by just knowing that it's temporary. Everything is just temporary. And what, instead of looking at the drama and the wrongness of the bushfires that are burning everything to the ground right now, where are you allowing that to happen in your body? Where do you need to go back into some radical self-care so that you can start looking at thriving beyond this matrix that all of this wants to keep us hooked into? Limitation is just a temporary state, and it takes a brave leap to get out of that. You have to train yourself out of living into that and go back into your calling. Something that comes from your heart. You can't ignore it. You just can't ignore it, and you have to do that by staying connected to your body and expanding into that by the identification of the things that you keep sticking yourself back into that make you feel stuck and heavy. And then you're in this fight, the survival state of, I have to stay alive, because you're literally burning off the old stories and the lies and the limitations. And nature knows how to move beyond limitation. Nature always is looking for a new way to thrive. It's part of the natural feeding cycle of Earth. If you spray a weed with Roundup, or you see that with fire, when the bush gets burnt, within a week you start seeing all this new green growth show up. And I think a lot of it, and this is just my awareness, is whenever there is disastrous events, catastrophic events, living that full catastrophe life that John Kabat-Zinn describes so beautifully, it's because we aren't in honoring of the natural cycles of nature. We are seeing ourselves as separate to nature. And, if you're a weed and someone sprays Roundup on you, and that's the toxic shame and the blame and the projections that other people give us, and our own thoughts and our own feelings and our own perceptions about that the world is not a safe place, we literally are killing ourselves from the inside. And we forget that we're greater than that thing that we're identifying from the story. And this is what nature teaches us all the time, is that nature is always going to demolecularize, right? It's going to demolecularize, and it's going to re-establish a new sequence of being to make sure that it goes up and around and thrives again. And we have to get out of our own limitation of space, and get out. And get out into nature. Get into the nature of your heart. Get into the nature of women and people that see you and want the same things as you. And into spaces like Brave, where we come together and we gather the greatness of our own minds and our own talents and capacities, and we move away from that entanglement that's always coming from the negative. It's always coming from the wrongness of things, and start playing the game of life in the most amazing, fastest ways possible. And that's to realize that you're not in the matrix. And when you're in the company of people like that, you cannot but thrive. Hi Mandy, nice to see you here. So just know, it's when you're living in a world where there are people that are dying to be right in their limited point of view, it's always going to come from survival. It's always going to come from a state of survival, and it's not sustainable, right? Everybody gives, and then to next state of affairs in the news and the next emergency, everybody's attention's diverted off of it. We saw this with the lion, Cecil the lion. We see history repeating ourselves, and I want to know, what if we stop trying to find the right thing to say, or the right way to show up, or the right way to do things, and we just start acting from a place of heart, of going deep down. When I find that I prepare content, you can do that all the time. You have enough content in you to keep going and going and going without having to prepare anything. And when you just stay open and vulnerable, and you trust that what you have to say will be heard by the people that are wanting to hear this, and I appreciate you all being here, you don't need to prepare. You don't need to prepare out there in pretty slides and content and, saying the right thing and proving the rightness of how intelligent and how smart you are. You just get out of your way and let your heart speak. Then the ego gets to die off. And the more that you do this, the more you can't live in the past. You can't live in the limitation. You can only live in the greatness of what am I becoming in 10-second increments of interesting point of view. Your past story is only going to tell you what's not going to happen, right? Why you can't do things. And it's always going to come up with a reason why you have to take yourself out of the game. Is this making sense? Give me some energy. Tell me that you're still with me. So rather than trying to understand why things happen the way that they happen, what if we can start looking at how can I be of contribution to this thing? How can I be better than I was yesterday? Start by tending your garden. Where do you need to start cutting back and prune back some of your internal stuff that's overgrown, so that you don't have to burn yourself up in a wildfire inside that looks like adrenal fatigue or burnout or lupus or some chronic fatigue syndrome or whatever it is that you decide that you're going to create as a way to give yourself time to go back to your heart and get realigned with your North Star. Stop trying to find the right things to say. You can't, instead of preparing out there, what I want to impart, and what again I learned today of how powerful, it's powerful when you just show up as this totally real and raw and open book and listen to what people are asking. There is no preparation. Myopic viewpoint keeps you limited. Nice fancy words, Anjana. I love that word. Yeah. So, just stay open and vulnerable, and trust that whatever you have to say, somebody's already looking for it, which is why it's come to you anyway. Don't get to prepare in the mind. That's the old way of doing things. When you're in your mind, you can't be in your head. And I just don't prepare anymore from that old state of mind, because it feels funky and inauthentic, and it's never things never look like like you think they're going to look, and they never show up the way that they're going to show up. And they show up in people asking questions, asking for support, wanting to contribute back to you. And it's amazing. It's so much bigger and greater than you could ever imagine that you could go in your like bullet pointed outline and of how you think the current events or the program or the retreat or the workshop's going to go. I used to believe that I was never prepared. Yeah. And I think this is beyond belief too, isn't it? That the preparation takes you out of the game, because you're in your mind, which has to come from a limited construct, Anjana. So I'm so happy that you know that was the lie that you were just trying to make true. And yes, it's funky, and yes, it gets messy, and yes, there's kind of an awkwardness to it. But as you sort of gain momentum and you get out of your head and more into your heart, and I've seen this happen for myself when I show up and talk to you guys on these Facebook Lives, is that there's a space that opens. There's an opening for information to come through that may seem disjointed and a little discombobulated, but trust what you have to say will be heard by the people that are looking for you and are asking for what you're sharing. Don't get to prepare in the mind. Okay, it doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work that way. And I think we all know that when you go to presentations and you see people that are giving talks, they're so over rehearsed that it's almost robotic and automatic, and there isn't the connection. And when you see people that just speak from a place where they well up with tears, and you can just, that there's a felt sense that is my story. That's why I love teaching story selling, because you're not selling your soul to the devil. You're not coming from a script. You're just showing up and saying, use me, rather than just trying to force yourself to write for the sake of writing. Preparing in the old ways just doesn't work anymore. The thing you need to prepare is yourself from deep down. Honor what comes through you and be in the practice of living from your heart, really living from your heart, that wants you to know and share from just enjoying being you. Does that make sense? The byproduct of all of that for me is always this connection. It's like, oh my God, this has gone so much off of a tangent because I'm not in control, or thinking that I need to control and keep to my time limit and stick to my script of what I think people want to hear. We want to tune in to what are people wanting, what are people asking for. Even speaking to a friend, messy scattered thoughts, taking the garden route to tell my story. I love that, Anjana. I really love that. It is the garden route. If you're wanting to climb Kilimanjaro and you look from away, you know that the ascent, you have no idea what's going to be on the way. And this is where when we're sitting in the mind and we're preparing to that point of exhaustion, you miss being present in the moment. You can't be present in the moment because you're living in your head, trying to work out every single possible scenario of what could go wrong, rather than enjoying the ride, enjoying the adventure, and tending the garden along the way, being the guardians, being the stewards of the earth. And it's just like, that's the part of me that's pretty bummed out and is pretty gutted and pretty sad at the moment with the fires in Neisner, is where did we lose our way? Where did we lose our way to not honor with great, great reverence from our heart how to live in harmony with nature? If we're warring inside ourselves, if we are burning out and literally combusting inward, our environment is going to show us that we are really needing to come back into a more harmonized state of being in nature, in the nature of ourselves. And when we do that, the byproduct of that inward connection, becomes the interconnectedness of the nature of everything, because you're connected to you. So you're not making anything greater than you. You're not making your talk or your interview or a Facebook Live like this or a workshop or anything bigger than you. And that's where the effortless flow of being in the now, becomes greater than your need to feed this addiction to getting it right or making other things bigger than you and practicing and doing presentations. Present you in the highest form of love that you possibly can, which is heart to heart. Because we have so many ideas that we want to share. I do this all the time. It's like, oh my gosh, it's the Gemini in me that likes communication. And there's so much to talk about, and we're going in our heads all the time. We're not being present to tune in and listen to what is required in this moment. So rather than allowing ourselves to be fully present in the moment, in this moment, and I'm just checking because I'm not being present to your comments. It's funny, they come and they go. I'm talking about the fire. Maybe Phoenix is rising. And you know what? It's either a yes or a no. And I said this with Brave. It's just like you're either in or you're out. You either are willing to make that brave step and show up and take the action that's aligned with the heart space, or you're not. So for me, I very much had that awareness that the old stuff needs to burn away. What is the garden route built upon? Well, did the prisoner of wars build those roads? I'm not sure about the history of the garden route. Have we infringed and gone out of congruence in living with nature? Yes, we're taking away habitat from animals, from the way things are. We're shifting things. We're pushing back the sea. We're doing this in so many ways. We're so against nature. And that's what, again, comes back to me to this internal warring of going against your true nature. Is you're literally fighting against the very existence of the nature, the natural order of how things should be. So I think all of this are all big wake-up calls for us to get back into congruence with our internal nature, rather than looking outside of ways to be against and fight against, and to come back to this deep, deep honoring and reverence of nature. She is mighty. The oceans in Cape Town, the sea, the way the waves were crashing over that. How far out of balance have we become in a species that's literally has our own survival in the balance that's actually affecting all the other creatures, great and small, that are just part of our own destruction. So, rather than allowing yourself to go into the disaster of full catastrophe living, what if we can just come back into our hearts and feel excited? Feel excited when you're excited. Allow yourself to feel depressed when you're feeling depressed. Be real, be raw. Not every day is a good day. This week has sucked for so many people. But if we're not willing to stop and push pause and take a moment to actually love whatever arises, and for me that has been this freaking soup of every emotional spectrum under the sun. I have sort of swung from anger and frustration and helplessness and excitement at what are we going to grow out of this recent tragedy. It's no longer tragic. It just is what it is, and now we get to rebuild and reconcile and get back into nature and back into harmony. And maybe these Facebook Lives suck that I do. Maybe the fact that I and I are and I talk all over the place and I just tap into the energy and I don't prepare and I don't have sticky notes stuck up all over the place to keep me on track. I'm taking the windy route, and I'm so grateful that some of you are willing to do that with me and get some value out of my time with you. That it's gonna suck in the beginning when you start to do things differently, and it's important to just know that whatever you are doing, now is all that matters. Not what you were doing the moment before in the preparation. All the moments that we have from every 1 second, microsecond at a time is as important and as precious as the next one. So preparing is being in your head. Getting good content out's easy, right? But if you want it perfect and you want to get in your head and present information, you have to disconnect from your heart, because you can't be here and here at the same time. Keep it windy. We get it. Haha. Thank you, Mandy. So, how are you going to do some pruning? And we don't want to do neural pruning, which happens when we're teenagers. Every bit of brain and nervous system that we're not using gets cut back in that normal nature of growing into an adolescent. That if you're already short on neurons firing and wiring together because you've had some kind of chronic, unpredictable, toxic stress, or you're living on worry, and you've been swimming in this cosmic soup as children, neural pruning is not great for when you grow up, because you don't have enough neurons to fire and wire together. So it's very difficult to spark the flames. That is our vital life force. It's our essence of who we are. It's our true nature. We need to keep the kindling on the fire. We need to keep the fire to warm the blood, and we need it to not be too hot that we overheat. We need to know when it's time to bring in a cool wind, or to bring in the water element to get the heat down, so we're not pathologically combusting inward or outward in our projectile vomit of assumptions to other people that have perhaps hurt or betrayed us, or excuse me. So yeah, that was kind of my musing on today, and what came up during Brave today, and the content and the great action steps that we took in process during our live Brave interaction today. And also just still sort of having one ear on the peripheral like a horse, one on the narrow view of what is required and what action steps do I need to take in my own life, but one ear having a very wide perception of what's going on, being aware of what's going on around us, so that we can contribute in a way that is sustainable without burning ourselves out. So stop preparing in your head. I can't remember who it says, but I think it was Tony Robbins that said, stay in your head and you're dead. And that's so true, because that's the killer of all dreams, right? That's where we go into procrastination. You're not getting into your heart, and you're not preparing you for what you have to do when you're in your head. So the best way to prepare for anything is to stop making everything else bigger than you. You are your most valuable asset, and you are the greatness of who you are if you just get out of your head and you stop playing that old movie and that old story over and over and over again in your head. Then you get to focus out there rather than being present with yourself and enjoying those high pressure situations, like getting on a stage or talking. To me, being on Facebook Live is a moderately high pressure situation for me when I'm in my head, when I just kind of let go of any expectation about where I'm going and who's going to show up and who's going to engage or who's going to find value and who's going to think this is a load of shit. The choice is you stay or you go. It has nothing to do with me, and honestly, this is part of how I process without internalizing and going into worry, is being able to have a platform and a community and a beautiful tribe like you that takes what you want when you want it. I get to heal myself. I get to grow through these conversations, because actually it's a lot more fun talking to you than it is just talking to myself in my head. So these are hard conversations, and I hope that you feel that, because that's what it is. And if they aren't, you need to kick my ass and remind me to show up and just be present. Stop tricking yourself. Stop tricking yourself that what is coming up in your life, in the external peripheral, in the wider global cosmic consciousness is bigger than you right now. These are just concepts that you're creating in the now. So just love them. Love the fact that you're concerned about people that you know, or what this is going to mean to the economy, or what this is going to mean to the animals. And just love the fear, or the anxiety, or the depression, or the sadness, the destruction, and know that through there has to be fire, right? The wood feeds the fire feeds the metal. Everything feeds itself. And out of the ashes, like Anjana said, we are the phoenix rising, but we have to be aware of where we're living from and how we are tending to our own gardens. If you don't water the wood gets brittle, it breaks, it gets dry, and it's more likely to catch fire. So, we're always looking like the three little bears. Not too much, not too little, but just right for you. What's right for your heart right now? And go there, love into that, and get in the practice of being in the present moment with your feelings. You can't heal what you don't feel. And if you don't feel it, you're going to get energetic nudges that sometimes are big kick in the asses, like devastating fires and floods and all the things that you see going on, the extreme weather conditions that we're having, while Mr. Dickhead Trump sits there saying there is no such thing as global warming and that it's okay to kill bears in hibernation. That's not okay for me. But ranting and raving and complaining about him isn't going to change what is. We have to tend to our own piece of garden. And it starts with loving you first, loving the things and the parts of you that you don't like inside of you, and being present so that you can get authentic and just know that it's coming from resistance. It's coming from resistance. Just as speaking like this is coming from a place of a piece of me that's resisting the fact that I shouldn't be doing it this way, because the old way says you have to prepare yourself to the point of exhaustion. Rehearse until you sound like Siri. Okay? We dehumanize ourselves. So it's just resistance to that old part that thinks you should be prepared, Anjana. You haven't done enough work yet. You need to prepare some more. It's uncomfortable because that's the old way that you have been programmed and indoctrinated to think is the only way, rather than coming back to your heart and knowing that the heart does not need to prepare. The heart beats because the heart beats. And that is the visible proof of living an authentic, real, raw life. And when you start to live more from an open heart, you start to fill yourself up. And then you start to see it rising out and connecting with other people so that they get filled up. And they start feeling into their hearts. And then you start honoring being in the space of knowing that there is no other thing that is bigger than you out there. Because nothing is bigger than you. Realize that you are nervous, and I'm always nervous when I go out there into this vulnerable position of talking with you, because I forgot that my voice matters, and it goes away. It goes away more and more and more the more that you practice that self-appreciation of loving you and the parts that you think are not right yet or perfect enough yet. That's just the illusion. That's just the lie of the old way. It's just the lie. And it will go away the more that you start to connect with yourself, which is your meditation and your morning pages and your pushing pause and knowing there isn't a right way. There's only your way. And you're not afraid about not doing it. You're afraid of what it's going to cost you if you don't. So love the part that doesn't want you to go there, and stay in your heart in the moment. That's the only preparation that is required in this time right now, is to be true to who you are. There is only one of you. And you might be off in the moment to be present with what wants to come through you. And yes, like me, I'm starting to appreciate the clumsiness of my ums and my unrehearsed conversations with you. And that maybe some people will judge it as being unprofessional. But that's just the old way of preparing like that. That doesn't honor what you're feeling and being in the moment, in the present moment. The only thing that you need to prepare for is loving yourself more, and the parts that you're feeling are unprepared for, things you have absolutely no control over, like wildfires and floods and natural disasters. And man-made ones too. But we are either the destroyers or the creators of our own reality. And you can't create without destroying the old stories in the mind and planting very fertile, very gently, tending the soil of your heart. I love you too, Mandy. I love you too. So, thank you for joining me on Saturday. Praise to Naisna. Love for what is. And trust that whatever comes of this latest fire, beautiful new things are going to grow out of the ashes. If enough of us start loving from that place instead of judging it as wrong, imagine how much things can change so much quicker or faster. So just know that if you're resisting any of this, if you're resisting anything of what you're seeing going on globally or in your backyard, just know that there's a lie somewhere there that's keeping you stuck. And if you're afraid of not doing it the right way, if you're afraid of staying where you are, if you're afraid of anything, including your own capacity to be great, love the part of you that goes into that limitation and that lie, and just go back into your heart. It's the only preparation that you require right now. I hope you heard me. I hope you heard me. Let yourself experience the pain. Own your feelings. Because that's the most truthful thing that you can give yourself. That's all there is the truth of you and what others identify with, because the world doesn't really allow us to publicly, up until this point, express that we're not feeling good, or that we are lonely, or we're in scarcity, or we're not great, we're not doing great. We're not allowed to be depressed. The biggest thing you can give to yourself is to get out of that old way. Be your own Neo. Be your own Neo. Practice staying in the heart and realize there is no right way to do anything. Everything else starts to feel really phony. And the more work that I do with my clients, the more spaciousness of consciousness, of awareness, of being awake, eyes wide open, the more you start to see the contrasts of the old ways where everything feels fake and phony, and you feel it in your heart. You see through the veil of the fake smiles and the perfectly made up do's and the $1 million lifestyle of yachts and Prada shoes, or whatever those fancy shoes are, and the act now marketing, all that fear and scarcity marketing and all the tricks that go with it. You start to see it. You don't need to make it wrong. You just need to know that that's not what you're choosing. And the best, I think the only way forward, and a lot of my nearest and dearest colleagues and mentors are saying the same, are aligned in that same resonance of the only way forward is connection. And I've said that for years. Currency is connection. When we're being real and we're being raw and we're allowing ourselves to cry out together and we're allowing ourselves to feel and be depressed and celebrate the lows as much as we celebrate the highs and the successes, the more there is that we can give to a new world that is sustainable. The more we give permission to others to take however long they need to take to grieve, to not rush the process of loss. Thank you, Zachary. To not process the processing, the presentation of putting on the smiley face and saying, I'm fine, but to actually stop, unhook from everything. Make eye contact. Fall in love with your shadows. Fall in love with your fears. Because the more you allow yourself to be your own internal witness, the more you allow others to witness the lows that they're feeling. And I can't remember who said it, but my version of that is the shadow dancing work that I so love to share. That it's that lie again, and the truth of that when you honor what you're feeling and how much light you allow yourself to bring in is only measured by how much darkness you can accept. And the only thing that makes it dark is your resistance of being love in a beautiful physical body, your horse, your animal that is always urging you to live an unbridled life, an untethered life. Your soul knows what your soul knows, and it doesn't give a shit if your ego is inconvenienced by it. So we have work to do, and to me that is true healing. You know, feel into your shadows, fall in love with your fears, love whatever arises, so that other people have permission to bring their light out, and just let everything else take care of itself, because it will. That's true healing. That's whole living. That is fulfilled living. And that's how we get to create a new world of love and kindness. And that is, for me, the brave, bold act of daring greatly, of living from your heart. And it's the truth of you. It really is. And it's powerful. It's powerful. So I think I made up for a whole week of being very quiet and inwards in this conversation today. Thank you for joining me. Fire breath. Energetically, it's just like, if we don't believe that we have the power to let things run their course, and also to contribute to putting out the physical, literal fires that are burning all over South Africa right now. What if just by your intention, by shifting back into the heart and loving the part of you that's on fire, and not in a good way, but really, you know, letting the fire calm down, is going to show up and express itself in our external environment, because we're the microcosm of the macrocosm. But our peace is great. So live into your greatness. Enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are. Zachary, it's good to see you here. I appreciate you. All right, people. Lots of love. Mwah. This is so interesting. I can't